to all aspects of navigation. But today, she's presenting another aspect of her personality, which is thinking about maps and map making, right? Okay.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It is a great honor and a great pleasure to be here. Can you hear me without the microphone? Can I skip it? As Misha said, I am been doing pathology throughout all of my career, but I'm also very interested in language and geography, and I'm also very interested in map making. So over the past 10 years, I think, or even longer, I and a few other people in Stockholm, including my former advisor, Dahl, we have explored various ways of approaching language mapping, and some of these thoughts and combinations I'm not going to present here. So what I thought I would do is give a brief overview of what the Geographical Information System technology goes for. So the acronym is GIS, and I'm going to be using throughout the talk. Then I'm going to look at how we go about when we map languages of the world. And then I'm going to bring in the geographic perspective on map making. And I'm going to be very critical about the fact that you don't really care. And I'll end up with some conclusions and what I think should be our road ahead. So what is GIS? They are essentially software-based tools that allow whoever is using them to combine data of different kinds. When you're using a GIS system, it looks like you are learning a program. And it's very, let's say, annoying for very many people who see themselves as linguists and they don't want to learn another piece of complicated software. But essentially what you're really doing is learning data modeling and the philosophy of data modeling. But that becomes transparent once you have done it. Then one of the main uses of GIS is to produce dynamic maps, and by dynamic I mean maps that can be manipulated either on the internet or even in a printed medium. You get, for instance, different zooms of one and the same area. You combine different things you want to show about the place. Okay? And it has to be, the last line on this slide, it has to be understood that the GIS technology produces adequate descriptions. It does not offer solutions to problems. Okay. So it may give you a good description so you can find a solution. This is one of its main powers. One of the early uses of GIS in linguistics is the old walls tool, I went ahead, where languages are presented by dots on a map here with world coverage, and different colors of the dots show different values in a database. So here I'm showing the map, the lightless distinctions and pronouns. It has nice aerial patterns, so if I want to, the tool allows me to zoom in onto southern India and examine the situation there. The tool also allows me to bring in other kinds of information. For instance, information about what cities there are there, what topography we have on file, so we can show a more detailed map. So that kind of information, the additional kinds of information that are brought in are called layers in GIS lingo. Anyway, the power of the tools is that we, as users, whoever is using that, can at will decide how much information they want to plug into the map at a particular moment and how much they want to leave out. That is very different from creating a second map. So we plug in that kind of information, you get some topography. The graphics in the old tool wasn't very advanced. This is what we could do at that time. Now, geographical GIS concepts are not new. They have existed for a very long time, and in the history of GIS, one happening is recorded, the London cholera epidemic from 1854. Indian ship came into town, the London cholera epidemic broke, and the Indians were blamed for it. So in came Dr. John Snow, and he had a very personal investment, legend has it, in that ship. So he put his dead patients on a map. So the red dots that you see on the map are dead people from cholera. And the lines are the streets of London. Then Dr. Snow put water pumps. And lo and behold, what he saw, what you should be seeing too, is there is a high concentration of death around one water pump and almost none around the others. So this is your spatial analysis in action in 1854 with a piece of paper and a pencil, really. Because Dr. Snow had shut off that pump and people stopped dying, and the Indians lived and everybody was happy. Dr. Snow went into history as one of the first people to have performed spatial analysis to solve a problem. I like this story because it also introduces the very basics of what GIS technology is about. We have different shapes to represent different objects in the world. So, different geometry is used for dead people and water pumps, and those are points. And then the streets of London are represented by lines. An abstract area, the extent of the depth around the water pump, can, with some imagination, be taken as a polygon. So there you have the three geometric objects used in the technology, and they're used to this day to represent objects of the world. Now we use very sophisticated technology to combine different data types and to produce correlations and descriptions between different pieces of data. What I think is worth bringing in here is the vector model, where objects are represented as points, lines, or polygons. And all of these have the property that they can be reasonably thought as delimited in the world. They tend to be represented in some kind of a tabulated format. The other format that is used in GIS is the raster model, where you represent topography, precipitation, temperature, and none of these does have any reasonable kinds of spatial limits. So the raster is typically stored in TIFF files, and in the data in the computer, it's represented as a grid. So linguists have started to use both, but in the last 15 years, we have mostly worked with vector geography. In order to use GIS, you need software. And those are, I divide them in two different groups, those that are free and those that are not. So the free is the list here. It's not very exhaustive, but I think it covers what most people use. The Google products are nice, user-friendly pieces of software. They don't get you very far because their graphics are custom to the computer screen and nothing else. GRASS is spelled out the acronym so that it's not what you might be thinking about. It's a GIS system, a very stable one. It's open source, and QGIS is also open source. There are also modules of R that are open source. Then there are those that are the opposite of free. They're extremely expensive, and They're topped by the Esri products, who are, I describe them as the Microsoft of the GIS world. They have been very pervasive. It is my impression they have infiltrated the school system and the university system of the US. They're also very present in Europe as well. They take a hefty fee for their licenses, but they also provide training and support, which you don't really have with the open source software. We need to use open source, we have to use open source because we go on taxpayers' money. At the same time, to use open source presupposes that you do have local expertise, people on site that are competent to help you and to develop what you want to do. Now, I know that a lot of people are maybe asking, so why is this relevant to linguistics? I want to study language, not geography. Languages are spoken in specific places, and this is a school about aerial linguistics. So a lot of people here are very aware of the relevance of space in language studies. I've listed here on the slide some of the uses of GIS for language studies, and there are many more. You can use different kinds of geometry depending on the size of a language, how many speakers speak it. You can map languages in urban areas, I'm going to come to that. You map sedentary versus non-sedentary cultures with different layers or different types of geometry as well. You make correlations, which we love to do, between specific linguistic features and also non-linguistic features. So all of this is highly relevant to us, which is why it's also highly relevant that we also know a little bit about the technology and take what is relevant to us from it. My last line on this slide is also the production of adequate language maps, which I think we still need to become aware of our approaches to language mapping and start to producing better maps. What we have been doing is to learn that these pieces of software exist. We like to work with big data, so we've been learning how to geocode our data sets and how to correlate them. But as far as language cartography is concerned, we remain fairly traditional in our approach and even beyond and before Dr. Snow. So I will briefly summarize how I see our approaches to language cartography and maps. In very many printed atlases, you draw an abstract area somewhere and you say, well, this is where Andy is spoken. And people who don't know anything else about Andy are happy because you showed them where Andy is. Maps are seen as illustrations, and usually not very important ones. They are secondary to any linguistic work, which I think is unfortunate because we are scientists and we should respect what we do. And if something is not important, then we shouldn't put it in our works. So if we start by the mapping of language as an abstract area, I'm going to start by a map that is produced by non-linguists, and that claims to show the distribution of major languages in the world. And many people would be fairly upset about this map if I read the color codes right, which are not the best codes in this to start with, but you take time to read them, you find out that India is the only multilingual country in the world. It is not clear why English and French are mentioned several places, sometimes separately, sometimes together with other languages, so we get English and French together, and French and English, and French and Sango, so there is it gets the impression of a potluck thing rather than anything scientific. But it's a fairly recent map, and a lot of people are very happy with it because they want to see the big picture, and this is a big picture. We can go into more details about what is being mapped, because some languages are mapped on a language level, then there are genealogical units that are mapped. And as a Bulgarian, I'm not entirely happy that Bulgaria is mapped as speaking Turkic. All of it. And I'm sure other people will find other sensitive things. But let's say this is a map that is outside of linguistics. If we look at the linguistic atlases, I'll bring in an example that Dahl and Dahl brought in very early when we're starting to think about this. So it's about the Athabascan language Aten. And in the Langscape Atlas, it is mapped by the area number 24. If you look up the number 24 in the index, you find out that that's the wrong language. It's not the 10, it's something else. Then the Alaska Native Language Center has a polygon, and the ethnologue has a different polygon, and then you get to see the places where Ethno is spoken, and you put all of these together, and you find out that the place Chikalun, where people who produced the documentation for this language live, is outside all three areas. And all three areas show some overlap and then huge differences. I think it's many people here who have done field work will have their own set of horror stories about the misrepresenting of their language. So that's a given in the print, given the limitations of the printed medium and how we think that we should approach the representation of a language location on a map. But I think there is sort of a consensus nowadays that smaller languages have to be represented by the places where these people live, instead of like some abstract polygon that you don't know what it covers. Languages that are not very big, I just said this so I won't forget. So you use what the technology actually gives you, and that is different kinds of geometry. If I'm to summarize what our traditional approaches are insufficient, how they're insufficient. While they give us highly inaccurate maps. There is no question about that. On a big zoomed map of the world, most languages of the world, which are small, are completely invisible. So we need the technology there. So we need to be able to see the world in different kinds of zooms. Languages in urban areas, the language distribution of urban areas is simply not there. And this means that multilingualism is also not on these maps. It also means that it is not very clear often where the data come from and what is being mapped, which genealogical uses are being mapped, and if the distribution that is shown is modern or historical. And there appears to be no awareness whatsoever of how geographers approach map making. And I think it's important, if we use a geographic product, that we show some interest in how the people who produce that product actually go about it. So how am I doing in terms of time?
Very well.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to spend the rest of this presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about the language composition of urban areas, and whether it's utopic, whether it's even realistic that we do something about it in our mapping. And then I'm going to bring in some geographic criteria and approaches to map making. As I said, languages, the cities are completely absent from traditional language maps. And this is, I mean, it doesn't even have to be a weakness. There is so much you can jam on a map and make it comprehensible. It's not that it hasn't been possible to do it so far. And there are other reasons that I'm going to come to. But there is the fact, what I'm citing here is a United Nations report. And half of the world population lives in cities. So when we ignore the language composition of cities, we present a very skewed picture, that's my last line here, of the language distribution around the world. The least we can do is to flag it, and flag it really clearly, that the cities are not on our maps for a number of reasons. Technically it hasn't been possible to do it. And then there are other reasons. The data about cities are really shaky. I mean, they come from census, okay? And the census is a questionable data source for many people for good reasons. It's not available for all countries because not all governments care to ask a question about language in their census. It is not clear that when the census people go and record information that they actually do it accurately, or that they even understand what they're being told and they write something that they thought they heard. So many people discard the census as a source of data that we can seriously use. At the same time, this is the source of data that we have. But we can say we stop there because we don't have the data, we don't have the means to get them. I worked with the US Census for a while, and I will show you what the US Census asks and how the US Census chooses to share their data first. So what they ask is, do you speak a language other than English in your household? And you hit a yes, which language is that? And then, how well do you speak English? Okay. So in the best of the world, if you take everything that the census workers wrote down, you can gauge proficiency in English. You'll have no idea if people who said they speak Greek, if they really speak Greek, or they know a few words and they tell you they speak Greek and stuff. So that's one. I mean, there are several problems here, and you notice as you go through the census data that people write down things that these languages don't exist or existed 500 years ago, but they heard it and they just decided, okay, this is what I write down, and there is no control of what they report. Then the census controls what we learn. There are about 300 languages mentioned in the census. When the census shares their data, they give us about a dozen. And you get to a menu that you can't really read from here, but the menu says, okay, you can see the distribution of non-English speaking households around the US. And they give you that menu where the biggest language is Spanish and the least spoken language is Arabic, so you get to choose among these languages that are about 12 to 14. So you choose Spanish and you get a map with various densities of dots that show you the Spanish-speaking households. And then you choose Arabic and you get another map with a lot lesser dots on it. And this is all that the census shows you, and I mean, it's nice that you see these areas, but sociolinguistically and even like if you had any serious questions about the vitality of these languages, you don't learn much. I worked with an urban geographer when I lived in Detroit, or close to Detroit. So we did mapping of the census data, and we correlated it with data on property, data on language teaching, and a bunch of other things. So I'm going to show you just a few maps and what you can do with the census data if you decide. So you can see that the red flags here indicate schools where Spanish is taught as a second language, and the purple area, which is right here, is the one with the most dense Spanish-speaking households. So you see that Spanish is taught way outside of the Spanish-speaking area. You go to the distribution of Arabic in the Arabic-speaking area, and you find that the schools where Arabic is taught are very close to that area and almost inside it. But if you delve into the Arabic area, you find that locally it's referred as the Arabic capital of the United States. That there is a huge affluent mass of Arabic speakers, and in that suburb, that is Dearborn, there is bilingualism, functional bilingualism on many levels. So we start from pizza establishments and various other restaurants, and you'll see the misspellings in English, but you go to doctor's offices and finally governmental offices, such as the police and everything else related to the government in Dearborn is bilingual with English and Arabic. So the vitality of these dots in Detroit is much stronger than, let's say, in Florida. And this is what GIS systems can buy you. And you can see that there is an old model of language vitality, and it's actually working. You have an affluency and a mass of people, and you can achieve very strong bilingualism in an environment that is less than encouraging. Now, I'm not sure if it's realistic that we can influence the data collection of how the censi work in different countries. I'm not sure if it's realistic to ask to alter the ways the census shares their data. But I think it's important to be aware of that we just completely disregard a huge percentage of language distribution around the world when we map languages. And I'm going to move to cartography now. So, for a geographer, anything, any illustration that wants to call itself a map has to have the four elements that I have listed here. Something that has to be there to tell you what the map is about. It also has to tell you where that is, so give you some spatial reference to something that you can identify on the surface of the earth. And it has to tell you how big that area is. So it has to have a scale. And finally, it has to explain the symbology of what is being shown on the map. So it has to have a legend. We don't require this. Anything, literally anything, gets into our dissertations, anything gets into our presentations. We simply don't care. There was a dissertation that got me fuming a few years back in Stockholm because this is a map of the dialects of Inner Mongolia. And I said, this is not a map. I don't know where this is. And the answer was, well, we don't teach this, and you can't require, poor Benjamin doesn't know the software it's not, you know, the software doesn't make you think. And I mean, maybe we should be teaching some of this software so that people know a little bit when they produce their maps. But then we should be teaching them how to situate what they study in a larger spatial context and make it comprehensible and communicate to other people. Now, so we didn't teach Benjamin how to make maps, so it's our fault. What I'm showing here is a map of somebody who is working with the GIS software and is showing the location of a language called Shabo, and all I can see from this map is that Shabo is somewhere in Ethiopia. I don't know where these places are. And frankly, when finding these places like this in a gazetteer or anywhere is a very time-consuming and painstaking enterprise. Because spellings are different, they may or may not exist in other listings, and you're doomed, really. And this person is working with a modern software, so they know that they can produce both the spatial context and the legends that are missing here, and the software does allow you to zoom on that area and show different scales and actually show where Shabo is spoken in Ethiopia. So you see that in Western Ethiopia, you can relate it to Addis Ababa and see that it's some 100 kilometers west of there. This is what a GIS software allows you to do. And there is nothing that should prevent you from doing that. And it's a fair criticism that we don't teach our students, but then we have the possibility of doing that. Then I'll come to the data that we use for our maps and map servers. A lot of it, or them, come from original research, so people go to the field and then they collect data. There is a lot of legacy data that we cannot easily discard. There are many reasons why we can. There's data on printed atlases, there are data in grammars, there are survey reports in the epilogue. For historical reasons, for completeness reasons, we need to use them. At the same time, we need to show some awareness of what they are, what geographers call quality of data. We have been learning how to combine different data types, but in a master thesis that was produced in Salzburg in 2009, the author Ulla Briscoe pointed out very nicely, I think, that there has been very little interest in mastering the modeling that is behind the technology. GIS specialists and geographers worry about data quality. They worry about various levels of uncertainty when they put stuff on a map. The mantra that they use is garbage in, garbage out. So if you put in bad data, you get a bad, weak product, no matter how sophisticated the technology that you use is. So we really need to start from scratch. I'll go through what is really meant by data quality. Some standards of what is a good map and what we require from it. So we are yet to define our standards. How accessible are the data that we put out? So we need physical access, intellectual access, and I think we've gotten good at that. We put them on some map servers, I'll come to this. Geographers worry about completeness. And geographers worry also about precision. Can somebody go and replicate what you did and get similar measurements and similar values? And geographers worry also about whether the domain that you're covering is entirely covered or only partially. So we need to define our standards. We don't have any. I think this is the basic and the main drawback of our work with mapping and with geography. We put our data on map servers. We share. We have reasonable metadata sets. We've been talking about metadata for a while. But as far as legacy data go, we know that they're not complete. We know that they're not precise. And we know that they are seldom, have interactive coverage. There is also another point that Peter Austin brought up to me, and there is the point of ethics. Not everybody wants to be on a map, so we need to make sure that whatever we're mapping, that people are in agreement with that, and they want to be shown, and how they want to be shown. So I'll go over to some GIS resources that we now have in linguistics. And what I put up first is not really a public resource. This is nowadays called the World Language Mapping System. It's a geocoded database that has changed names in the past, I don't know, 10 years or something. It's a product produced in close collaboration with the Echolog and the SIL people. It's a database with language polygons and language points that is circulating in semi-official ways. But frankly, we are grateful for it because with all the mistakes and misrepresentations that it contains, it's still a full world coverage, and we can build on it instead of trying to create something that huge from nothing, from scratch. Now we have, as I said, anytime there is a big geography-related project, they go talk to nowadays World Language Mapping System. It was called Global Language Mapping. Before that, it had another name, but that's the current name. And we talk to them, and they give us their current version, and then it propagates linguistics projects. So I'm going to list 3 of them here. The first one was language and location that was associated with the linguist list. The second one, and now very pervasive language catalog, the Glottolog, uses the points from the World Language Mapping System. There is Langscape at the University of Maryland, and they also use that. And when I say use, I mean use. I have not seen very many substantive changes. So that data set comes in polygons, comes in points. I'm going to show some polygons and some polygon system. Then there is the UNESCO Atlas of endangered languages that, as far as I could see and understand, does not build for a change on the World Language Mapping System. They use language experts and other sources. So now that we have the technology, what we do with it? Well, we go and take a ready-made data set. And that's completely legit. We have to build our stuff. But we don't really, my point is, we don't really build on them. We don't really develop them. What the data set looks like, I'm showing languages with up to 1 million speakers, those that are bordering on the small languages of the world. So the ones in blue are the ones that have between 100,000 and 1 million speakers, and then the other shades down to orange and yellow show the smaller and endangered languages. So that's, I mean, that's as erroneous as any polygons go. What I said about printed atlases applies equally here. Some are erroneously put, some are very sloppily put, but they exist. You can, it's digitized, you can move them. There is also inconsistency with regards to the time that is represented. So for the American continents, they represent the modern language distribution, and they map various reservations. For Australia, they map historical distribution. We just live with that. It's fine. Now what Langscape does, and I'm sorry, but this is the color scale that they use, and I've been changing it, but they have taken this data set and put it on a map server interface. You can search it. And it's linked to other digital resources. So, but as far as conceptualizing mapping of languages, it's just as traditional as any. So I looked for GIS, which is one of my favorite languages and favorite grammar, and you get Papua and GIS in the middle of many other dots. And then you clean up the picture a little bit, you click on the dot of GIS, and you get the coordinates of that dot. That's all you get. And as far as language location is concerned, again, it's something very approximate. If you open the GIS grammar, there are 2 villages mentioned there, but since we buy in the World Language Mapping System wholesale, this is all we put out. And you can't, as far as data sharing goes, you can't even if you decided to download that data set and have the dots on your own machine, you can't, because they're tied to that server. What the UNESCO Atlas of endangered languages did is to put the GIS dots, and they went to Steve Worm's Atlas, and they got the information from there, and they give some approximate area. That's all they do. And to me, they're very nicely put digital resources, but the thinking behind them remains very traditional. So we are lagging behind on that. I'm going to show just one more example and move you from Papua to where I currently live, to Sweden and Sami languages. So I looked for Sami and get to a dot. And if you read the database behind the dot, you see that they are actually aware of the 3 places where Sami is spoken, but they still put the dot in the middle of nowhere. And there could be, there could be reasons for that. But these reasons are not spelled out. You don't know why they chose to put the dot in the middle of an elk farm. It's the elk farm. And they have the technology, they have the resources, they have the information. It's not that they don't have it. They don't seem to find it important. And it's nice that they actually give you a lot of information on their database, and this is what we want dynamic maps to look like. But there is still a lot to be desired as far as conceptualization of the mapping goes. So I'm coming to a close. By GIS criteria, we just don't have any standards to match when we do our mapping. And also by the same criteria, our data sets are imprecise, incomplete, and inaccurate. Okay. And we may have to, you know, linguistics is not geography. So we don't have to become geographers in order to do adequate mapping. We may have to live with the inaccurateness. We may have to accept that we're never going to be very precise, and there could be good reasons why we cannot be precise. But I think the awareness of what we do and how we do it needs to be changed. And this is what our efforts should go into. With that, I will end. We use the technology to display and visualize various kinds of data in a flexible way. We can visualize variation and show data about it. We can do various kinds of models. There are several places around the world that emerge as very good centers for that. But we still need to define what, for us as linguists, counts as a good map, what we want of a good geocoded linguistic data set. We also, I think, need to take in whatever geographic criteria that are relevant to us. We need to work out which those are and take them more seriously. And yes, I think we should be including some basic geography, some basic cartography in our programs so that people don't come out with completely uninformative maps. And with that, I thank you for your attention. Thanks for coming.
This is question time and comments time also.
Hi, I have two questions. One,
Yes.
do you have at least some kind of guidelines or best practice that you would recommend to linguists to use, even if the community hasn't worked that out yet? And the other question is, what would be the recommended learning pipeline for people who want to start using this in their work?
Well, you know, I'm a very slow writer, and I'm planning on writing an article on this, exactly like addressing best practice in language mapping and linguists who don't want to be geographers. Learn, I mean, there is the 2 volumes that are called Language in Space, but I think they are very much detached from what somebody who sits down and wants to just whip up a map wants to do. You know, I mean, now I'm going to sound as if I work for Esri, but I don't. The software that I listed, you know, I'll scroll back to that slide. There is a quicker way. Yes. So. Anyway, the open source software, GIS and QGIS, are very stable products. And they also require a time that you have to invest. A couple of months, 3 to 4 months. And at that point, a lot of people give up because they say, hey, I have other things to do, I have to publish, and no. I put out something that I call a Mickey Mouse product because it's far from satisfactory. It's an online, it's called GIS Online, and it's completely free, unlike everything else that they sell. But you know, it gets you into the concepts of layering. You can import very limited. They would only take a data set of about 1,000 records. That's all they will take. Printing is tricky, as they print print you a map, but they're not going to print the overview map, and I've been like talking about here how you have to have spatial reference, so that overview map is very important. You can trick around that. So, I mean, to me, that piece of software is a good example of the saying there is no such thing as a free lunch. At the same time, I have tried it in my, from time to time I teach language and geography as a special class in Stockholm. And I realized that people don't go away, people don't drop the class when I introduce them with that tool. They're fine. And then, I mean, once they see that they have mastered layers, they have mastered symbology, they're with very limited projects, they can put links and they can achieve quite a bit of good product. Again, very limited. Then they're fine, and they're also encouraged to go and actually learn the real products. But when they go into something like QGIS, they already know about layers. They have learned some of the concepts. So it's not that hard. They have had some bridge stuff. So sorry, it's not going to be open source, but you don't have to pay. And this is what I would recommend, because it's, I mean, anyone with some basic computer intelligence can get into it. Then I'm not aware of any literature, so maybe I should get together with some people and write. I mean, when I teach the geography, the language and geography class, people really want a textbook, and I send them to an article here, an article there. Ulla Briscoe's thesis is a very good one, but it's a master's thesis, and it's really geared. She's a GIS specialist with an interest in linguistics. So maybe the time is right for a textbook. People to use.
This is not so much a question as, maybe it's a question. I share all of your objections to the usual standards in language maps, no coordinates, no title, no, almost nothing except a picture. Is there any group or any movement afoot to try to define standards like that? Of course, the whole task of defining linguistic cartography standards is a much bigger task, but just something that would tell publishers of books with language maps, make the author put in latitude and longitude lines, put a label on the same page and the caption on the same page, and maybe give a reasonable background and so forth. That is something which I think we have precedents for people doing things like that up and taking the initiative and doing it. That's how all of Stephen Berg's awareness of how to prepare text for documentation, the Leipzig, whatever they are, interlinearizing standards, rules, all of these things get started by a few small people. So if there isn't a deep doing step one, namely basics for how to publish a decent black and white map on paper, why don't you form a group and,
I'll be
issue standards?
Yes.
We'd all agree.
And I think, a school like this, aerial linguistics, this is there are potential good candidates here who could be part of that group.
Also, for instance, that new journal of linguistic geography, there's somebody with an interest.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't be hard to put together some group with credibility enough to say, do it this way.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you.
Can I ask a question? Sure. Okay, so my question was, I was thinking about things that you did mention, and it was really hard to find one, because some probably we encounter in our thinking about aerial geography have mentioned, like for instance, you have this problem of new settlements in the north of Dagestan where all languages are mixed, and you have every time you start thinking whether you should map them as languages or you should omit them because they do not reflect aerial patterns. But then you mentioned this situation of difference between, on the same map, difference of mapping of West Coast and North, I think, North America or something.
Yeah, North America and Australia.
Then there is this question of mapping villages versus polygons and so on. But then it occurred to me that one thing you didn't mention might be relevant for different kind of linguistic error research, which is different kinds of networks, like cross. So this is another thing that we need to think about when we think about language and aerial terms, is what are exact distances and connections in traditional paths people follow between villages or communities and so on.
Well, my answer to like the concern whether some places or settlements should be put on the map because this is where the language was spoken versus where it was spoken. You know, the beauty of GIS is that you can have a layer with.
Exactly. That's what we did.
Yeah, I mean, this is what the technology allows you to do. You don't have to make up your mind. You show both, and you say we are not sure, but this is what we know. And I think that this is plenty of information and very good information to show things that we are certain about and those that we are not. As to measurements, I mean, you know, even something Mickey Mouse says that ArcGIS Online allows you to do basic measurements on the map, so these systems do allow you to incorporate measurement.
Sure, but my point was exactly that it would be just as simplistic as the first maps that you show where all the French, Russian and so on. So we need more sophisticated ways and technologies to show path of connections. Because you need distances, you need altitude differences that they cross in the way, which is probably supported by Google Maps in a certain way. So this is something which we need for...
Well, but you know, I mean, this is something that I don't think we should be doing alone. This is where the geographers come in. And for that, we shouldn't try our hands on something that we learn on our own, but we should get in somebody we can explain what the problem is and let them do the technical work. I wouldn't try to do it. You know. I mean, I told some people at lunch I'm completely self-taught in this. I happen to be very interested in maps and mapping and geography, and soon after my dissertation I got some short postdoc. And I have written in the grant that this is what I wanted to do during my postdoc. But not everybody has that luxury. And again, I was learning the very basics of the software that people find annoying. But to put in a model of movement plus distance plus altitude, I don't feel confident doing it. I mean, I know that it exists and it's feasible to do, but this is where the collaborative work comes in, and geographers can get something out of this too, and they are interested in working with us. Yes? Yeah?
Just a follow-up on this. So I think personal information must exist, so if you go to Google Maps, it says how much it takes to walk into information there. I think it's more about the representation. I don't know if you have, for example, you can add a layer of buffer zones, like the distance around a region where you can walk in a day, something like that.
Yeah, but you need to represent somehow the usual path that people follow, which probably historical data, not the contemporary data that is very important. So you have to integrate the rules of the past. It's not just the tool to see what kind of distance you can cover, including the altitude. So a combination of this historical information on maps together with what Google knows about altitude.
And what Google knows about altitude is also in various databases that you can get for free, and Google also probably got that data for free. So, I mean, these are very valid questions, but and they're complex ones, but the technology does allow us to address them. Yes.
I'm very interested in this topic, and when I think about maps, what I'm mostly interested in is also like the political side of this issue. I mean, when we are building a map, we are more or less placing boundaries, and we know that specifically in the context of US native languages, sometimes the way linguists have divided the spaces where a language has been spoken have supported or not some land claims by the communities. So what I want to know is, do you think that as a field we are ready to kind of understand also this side of the question, and we are ready also to produce maps that do not have a negative impact on the people we are working for? And do you think that this kind of ethical issues should be either considered when we come up with best practice?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, what I said, like there was a very short point, but Peter Austin brought in ethical issues, and what you're saying like adds to the complexity of the problem. And Patty was telling me about creating maps together with the community where people work. So, I mean, putting something on a map has like a lot of power. People believe in that map, no matter how wrong it is. So it is very important that the people who are being mapped are involved in the mapping process, and that they accept what is being said about them. And boundaries are a very sensitive issue. I remember I once helped Henry Klidiagran, who is a linguist who works in Pakistan, the border areas to Afghanistan. He works on a small language called Paula. And I mean, the best projection on Paula also involved the showing of the border between India and Pakistan. And he said, absolutely not. No, I don't want this. I'm not taking sides, and neither do they. So we do it in a different way. But that border has to not be there. We're not getting involved. And it, you know, it's the same thing if you show a territory, then if that territory is contested, then it has to be clearly stated that it is not everybody agrees on this, but the people who live on that territory want it there this way. And the technology does allow, I mean, if you're printing this, obviously many people are not going to read that text. But then make sure that it's clear enough so that they read it. But if it's on a map server, and it's on the internet, you can have several versions, no problem, and then most people, not everyone, but most people should be satisfied, not happy. So.